Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're here, I bet you're thinking about what it takes to become a leader, and honestly, same here. So today we're taking a deep dive into this whole employee to leader thing, all based on a really insightful podcast episode I listened to recently.
Yeah.
Because imagine you're trying to level up in a video game. Well, we're going to try to figure out the cheat codes, the secret skills, but for leadership, not for beating the final boss.
You know, the thing that really grabbed me about this podcast was how it defines leadership. It's not just about managing people or making sure everyone meets their deadlines. It's more about influence. And honestly, think about it. You've probably already influenced people at work just by sharing ideas or helping someone solve a problem. Leadership just takes that influence to a bigger, bolder level.
So it's kind of like influence, but
Right.
amplified, right? And the podcast, it actually talks about the difference between leadership and management, which honestly, I think most people use those words interchangeably.
Yeah, totally. They get mixed up all the time. You're right. Management is more about keeping everything running smoothly. It's the schedules, the processes, all that day-to-day stuff. But leadership, that's different. That's about setting the direction, figuring out where everything's going, and even navigating the rough patches, you know?
Like if you're steering a ship, management's making sure the engine's running and leadership is charting the course.
Exactly. And you mentioned wanting to lead that new product launch, right? That's a perfect example. It's about having a clear vision for the product, yeah, but also being flexible enough to deal with the unexpected stuff that pops up.
I see what you mean, yeah. But the podcast also threw out a whole bunch of qualities that great leaders embody. Right?
Yeah.
Visionary, empathetic, decisive. Honestly, it's kind of a daunting list. Do we need all those things to be a good leader?
Well, the good news is, and the podcast really stresses this, you don't have to have it all figured out from the start. It's a journey, not a destination. Think about it. You've already grown so much in your role just from experience. Leadership development builds on that. It helps you refine those skills and tackle bigger and bigger challenges.
Good for you. That makes me feel a little better. So let's say you're like, all right, I'm ready for this leadership thing. The podcast actually says, and this is a direct quote, it's not just about getting a promotion, it's a mindset shift. What exactly does that mean? How do you shift your mindset?
Okay, so picture this. As an employee, you're mostly focused on your own individual tasks, right? But as a leader, you've got to zoom out and see the bigger picture, the whole landscape. You start asking yourself, how do my tasks, how do they contribute to the team's goals? And how do those goals fit into the overall company strategy?
So it's about seeing the forest, not just the trees. But it's not just about seeing the bigger picture, though, right?
Yeah.
The podcast also talks about shifting from, following instructions to actually taking initiative.
Yeah.
But isn't that a little risky? What if, I step on someone's toes or something?
I think the key is to start small, take baby steps. The podcast gives a really great tip. Volunteer for leadership roles on projects. Maybe mentor a colleague who's new to the team, show them the ropes. You were saying you'd love to lead that training program, right? That's perfect. It's a way to show initiative, gain experience, and demonstrate that you're ready for more responsibility, but without, overstepping.
It's like dipping your toes into the leadership pool before doing a cannonball. Yeah, I like that. But, okay, let's say you've got the right mindset. What are the actual skills, the concrete skills you need to actually be a good leader?
Okay, get this. The podcast is really adamant that the most important skill for any leader is communication. More than strategic thinking, even decision making. Honestly, I was a little surprised by that.
Really? Communication's top of the list. I mean, it makes sense, but tell me more about why the podcast is so focused on that.
Let's say, you have this amazing idea for a new project, right? But if you can't explain it clearly, if you can't get your team excited about it, if you don't listen to their concerns, their feedback, well, that idea is going nowhere. Communication, it's like the glue that holds everything together, from building relationships to actually getting things done.
So it's not just about being a good talker, but also about really listening to what others have to say. It's about creating a space where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas and concerns, even if they disagree.
You got it. And alongside communication, the podcast also talks about a few other crucial skills: decision-making, delegating tasks effectively, and resolving conflicts. All of these are super important if you want to lead your team to success.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. Why is decision-making so important for leaders? I mean, we make decisions every day, right?
That's true, we do. But as a leader, the decisions you make, they have a much bigger impact. You're often making choices that affect the entire team, maybe even the entire company. The podcast really drives home the point that you've got to be able to weigh different options, assess the risks, and make a call, even when there's no easy answer. And you've got to be confident in your decisions, especially when things get tough.
Okay, decisions, got it. Now, what about delegating? I'll admit, that's something I struggle with. Isn't there a risk that it can seem like you're just pushing your work onto other people?
That's a valid concern, yeah, for sure. But here's the thing, leaders can't do everything themselves. It's impossible. Delegating isn't about dumping tasks on your team, it's about empowering them. It's about trusting them with responsibility, giving them opportunities to grow, and freeing yourself up to focus on the bigger picture. Remember that product launch you're excited about. You're going to need to delegate effectively to pull it off.
So it's about being strategic with delegation, making sure the right people are doing the right tasks, and that everyone feels supported.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, what about conflict resolution? That sounds a little intimidating.
Conflict, it happens on every team. It's inevitable. And the podcast actually emphasizes that conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's about facilitating healthy dialogue, helping people see things from different perspectives, and finding solutions that work for everyone. You're going to need those great listening skills we talked about, but also a good dose of empathy, the ability to understand where other people are coming from.
Sounds like you need to be a diplomat or something. Finding that common ground and helping people work through their differences. So we've got the vision thing, the mindset shifts, and these core skills. But let's be real, the journey to leadership, it's not always smooth sailing, right? What are some of the bumps in the road we might hit?
Well, one challenge that really resonated with me, and I bet you've experienced this too, is imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome. That feeling that you're not really qualified, you're a fraud, and you're going to be found out any minute. I think everyone's felt that at some point, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're new to a leadership role and still figuring things out. The podcast has some great advice for overcoming those feelings of inadequacy, but we'll dig into that a bit later.
Okay, looking forward to that because imposter syndrome can be a real confidence killer. But are there any other, common challenges that new leaders often face?
The podcast also talks about finding that balance between authority and approachability. It's tricky. It's like walking a tightrope. On the one hand, you want to be seen as a leader, someone who can make tough decisions, but you also don't want to create too much distance between yourself and your team. Think about the leaders you've admired. I bet they were the ones who could strike that balance between being respected and being, well, approachable.
Right, like you're the captain of the ship, but you're also someone the crew feels comfortable coming to with questions or concerns.
Exactly. It's about being firm, but fair, decisive, but empathetic. And another challenge that comes up a lot, and the podcast touches on this, is time management. As a leader, there are so many demands on your time, it can feel overwhelming.
Oh, I bet. Meetings, deadlines, unexpected problems, and still trying to actually lead your team. It's a lot to juggle.
For sure. But the good news is there are strategies to help you stay on top of everything. The podcast recommends using tools like task managers and calendars. Those can be lifesavers. And remember what we were talking about with delegation. That's not just about empowering your team, it's also about freeing up your own time so you can focus on the most important parts of your leadership role.
So it's about working smarter, not harder. Prioritizing, being organized, knowing when to delegate. That sounds like a good way to avoid burnout and stay effective. All this talk about challenges makes me wonder about something else the podcast mentioned, continuous growth. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah. That's super important. And it often gets overlooked. Leadership, it's not a destination. You never really arrive. It's a constant journey of learning and developing. It's like you're always leveling up in that video game, gaining new skills, expanding your knowledge, and just refining your approach.
I like that analogy. It makes continuous growth feel a little less intimidating and more like an adventure.
Exactly. And the podcast is really clear. Even the most experienced leaders, they still need to keep growing and evolving. They recommend seeking out feedback regularly, staying up to date on industry trends, and surrounding yourself with mentors who can offer guidance and support. It's like building your own personal leadership support team.
I love that. You're not on this journey alone. You've got your mentors, colleagues, maybe even the people you're leading. It's a team effort. And what really stuck with me from the podcast is the importance of stepping outside your comfort zone. That's where the real growth happens.
Absolutely. Think about your own career. I bet some of your biggest leaps forward, your biggest accomplishments, they came from taking on challenges that pushed you beyond what you thought you were capable of. Leadership, it's no different. It's about embracing those moments of discomfort and seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's about pushing those boundaries, constantly expanding your skills, and never just settling. It's about striving to be a better, more effective leader. And this brings us to a really thought-provoking question that the podcast poses as we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
I'm all ears. What's the question?
The podcast asks, leadership can be tough, but it's also incredibly rewarding. It's a simple question, but it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? What are the things about leadership that you find rewarding? What motivates you to step into that role?
That's a fantastic question, and I think it's something worth reflecting on as we move to the next part of our deep dive.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with that deeper why behind our desire to lead. It's not just about the title or the authority. It's about the impact we can make, the people we can inspire, and the satisfaction that comes from guiding a team to success.
And it's a good reminder that leadership isn't just about what you give, it's also about what you gain. It's about personal growth, fulfillment, and the joy of seeing others thrive under your guidance.
I love that. So, as we move on to the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore something that's often overlooked, but absolutely essential for effective leadership.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Can you give us a little hint about what we'll be exploring?
Let's just say it involves taking care of the most important asset you have as a leader. Yourself?
Self-care and leadership. Okay, I'm ready for this.
Me too. Let's dive in.
So, earlier we were talking about leadership being kind of like leveling up in a video game. It's a fun way to think about it, but there's a serious point there too.
Yeah, I'm curious. What's the serious part?
Well, think about it. In a game, you wouldn't just charge into a boss fight without preparing, right?
Yeah.
You'd level up your skills, you'd get the right gear, maybe even find some allies.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So how do we level up for leadership in the real world?
The podcast actually gives some really solid advice on this. First, don't be afraid to take on challenges that push you a little. You mentioned wanting to get better at public speaking, right? Maybe volunteer to present at the next team meeting just to get some practice.
That's a good one. I always get so nervous before presentations, but I guess that's part of the stretching process, right? What else does the podcast suggest?
Finding mentors is huge. Think of them as your wise guides in the leadership game. Look for people you admire, people who have the kind of experience you want to learn from, and who are willing to share their insights.
Yeah, it's like having cheat codes for leadership, except they're totally legit and way more valuable.
Exactly. And here's what really stood out to me. The podcast really emphasizes that leadership isn't a solo mission. You're not in this alone. It's about building relationships, learning from others, and tapping into the collective wisdom of, your network.
You're right. No leader's an island or whatever. I guess sometimes I get so focused on proving myself that I forget to, reach out and ask for help.
We all do that. It's totally normal. And speaking of asking for help, let's circle back to that imposter syndrome we talked about earlier. The podcast had some practical tips for dealing with it, but I wanted to share one perspective they offered that I thought was really interesting.
Oh, yeah, imposter syndrome. That feeling that you're not really cut out for leadership and everyone's going to figure it out eventually. I'd love to hear what the podcast has to say about that.
What I found fascinating is that they actually frame imposter syndrome as a sign of growth. They say that those feelings of self-doubt, they often come up when we're pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones, which is, well, that's kind of what leadership is all about.
Wait, so feeling like an imposter could actually be a good thing?
In a way, yeah. It means you're challenging yourself, you're taking on new responsibilities, and you're expanding your capabilities.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as a weakness, try to reframe it as a signal that you're on the right track, you're moving in the right direction.
Okay, that's a real mind shift. So it's not about getting rid of those feelings completely, but more about changing how we think about them. But how do we actually do that? How do we deal with those moments of self-doubt when they inevitably pop up?
The podcast suggests focusing on your past successes. Take some time to think about times when you overcame challenges, achieved goals, and received positive feedback. It's easy to get caught up in our perceived shortcomings. But remembering what we've accomplished, that can be a real confidence booster.
It's true. I definitely need to remind myself of that more often. Sometimes I'm so focused on what I need to improve that I forget to acknowledge the things I've already done well. What else does the podcast recommend?
They also talk about the importance of seeking feedback from people you trust. Talk to mentors, colleagues, maybe even friends who know your work well. They can offer really valuable perspectives and help you see yourself more objectively.
That's a good point. Sometimes, yeah, we're our own worst critics, right? Getting feedback from others, especially people we trust, that can help us challenge those negative thoughts and get a more balanced view of our ability.
Exactly. And don't forget about self-compassion. It's okay to have those moments of doubt. We all do. But don't beat yourself up about it. Treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a friend who's struggling.
Right? We tend to be much harder on ourselves than we would be on anyone else. But, we've been talking about all these internal aspects of leadership, the mindset, the self-awareness. But what about the external factors like the work environment, team dynamics, company culture? How do those play into effective leadership?
Ooh, that's a great question. And actually, the podcast addresses that too. They emphasize that leadership isn't just about individual traits and skills. It's also about understanding and navigating the context, the environment where leadership actually happens. I use this term situational leadership.
Situational leadership. What does that mean exactly?
It means that there's no single perfect leadership style that works in every situation. It depends on the specific context, the team's maturity level, the organization's culture, even the specific project you're working on. A leader who thrives in a fast-paced startup, they might not be as successful in a more traditional corporate setting, for example.
So it's not about finding that one right way to lead,
Hmm.
but about being adaptable and adjusting your approach based on the situation. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do you actually figure out which style is needed in a given moment? It seems like it takes a lot of awareness and observation.
You're right, it does. The podcast talks about the importance of, reading the room, being
Yeah.
perceptive, observant, and responsive to the subtle cues in the environment and from the people around you. They mention a few key factors that leaders need to consider: your team's skills and experience, the level of trust within the team, and the company's goals and values. It's kind of like being a detective. You're gathering clues to figure out the best way to lead in that specific situation.
And I bet this is where those communication skills we talked about earlier become super important. Being able to clearly communicate your vision, really listen to your team's concerns, and adapt your style based on what you're hearing.
Oh, absolutely. Communication, it's the bridge that connects you to your team no matter what the situation. It's about building trust, fostering collaboration, and creating that shared sense of purpose. And remember, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. Active listening, empathy, clear and concise communication, those are all hallmarks of effective leadership, no matter what the context.
Oh, to be a really effective leader, you need to be a master communicator, a keen observer, and really good at adapting to different situations. That sounds like a lot.
It is, but the good news is all of these are skills you can develop over time. And, as we've been talking about all these different aspects of leadership, it's becoming clear that it's not just about having a formal title or a position of authority. It's about influence, inspiration, and empowering others, regardless of your official role.
I totally agree. I've definitely seen people who weren't officially in charge, but who still had a huge impact on their teams. They were the ones who stepped up, offered great ideas, and helped everyone work together better.
Exactly. And the podcast actually has a term for that: informal leadership. They describe informal leaders as people who, even without a fancy title, demonstrate leadership qualities and have a real influence on their teams.
So it's about those individuals who just naturally step up, inspire others, and contribute to positive change, even if they're not officially the leader. I love that it means leadership can come from anywhere.
Absolutely. And the podcast really makes a case for why recognizing and nurturing informal leadership is so important. It creates a much more dynamic and thriving work environment when everyone feels empowered to contribute their talents and make a difference.
It's like tapping into this hidden leadership potential that exists within every team. And this whole idea of informal leadership, it really ties back to our overall theme of, transitioning from employee to leader.
Oh, yeah, I see the connection. How so?
Well, I'm thinking that embracing informal leadership opportunities could be a fantastic way for aspiring leaders to develop their skills and get some real-world experience.
You're so right. It's like a stepping stone. By taking on leadership roles within their teams, even without a formal title, individuals can prove what they're capable of, build confidence, and get a real sense of what it's like to lead.
It's a chance to practice those communication skills, try out different approaches, and get a feel for what it actually feels like to lead, all before taking on a more formal leadership role.
Exactly. The podcast emphasizes that these informal leadership experiences, they're incredibly valuable for building credibility, really honing those communication skills, and developing the ability to influence and inspire others.
It's like a leadership boot camp, but without all the yelling and push-ups.
Uh-huh. Maybe not the push-ups, but you get the idea. It's about seizing those opportunities to lead, to make a difference, and to show your potential.
And what I really appreciate about this whole conversation is that it reinforces the idea that the path to leadership, it's not always linear or predictable. It's about taking initiative, embracing challenges, and showing what you're capable of through action.
It's about showing, not just telling.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that leadership, it's an ongoing evolution. It's not a destination. You're always learning, adapting, and striving to be the best leader you can be. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore something that's really crucial for effective leadership, but that often gets overlooked.
Ooh, I can't wait. Give us a little sneak peek. What are we diving into next?
Let's just say that taking care of yourself, it's not selfish, it's actually a strategic leadership move.
Self-care is a leadership strategy. I'm definitely intrigued.
Welcome back, everyone. We're jumping into the final part of our deep dive, and it's all about, well, this might sound a little unexpected, taking care of yourself as a leader.
Yeah, it's really easy to think that being a leader means pushing yourself to the max, like always being on, sacrificing everything for the team, the drill.
Yeah, totally. Like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're totally burned out, how are you supposed to effectively lead anyone?
Right, exactly. And the podcast, it really pushes back against that whole idea. They argue that neglecting your own well-being, it actually makes you a worse leader. It's not sustainable, and it can lead to burnout, bad decisions, and just a ton of stress.
Okay, so basically taking care of yourself, it's not selfish. It's actually a smart strategy if you want to be a good leader. But like, what does that actually look like in practice? I know the podcast mentioned a few specific things.
Oh, yeah, they definitely stress the basics. Getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and making sure you're getting regular exercise. I know, it sounds super obvious.
Yeah, right. Like, tell me something I don't know. But honestly, when you're juggling a million things as a leader, it's those basic needs that are usually the first to go.
Oh, it's so true. But the podcast makes a good point. Even small changes in these areas can make a huge difference in your energy levels, your ability to focus, and just your overall well-being. Imagine, trying to lead that product launch you're so excited about when you're running on like 2 hours of sleep and a whole lot of caffeine. It's not going to go well.
No, definitely not a recipe for success. So, okay, we've got the physical stuff down. But what about mental and emotional well-being? Did the podcast have any advice about that?
Yeah, they highlighted things like mindfulness practices, like meditation, or just doing some deep breathing exercises. Even taking like 5 minutes a day to quiet your mind and focus on your breath can really help manage stress and just stay grounded.
You know, I've tried meditation before, and I'll be honest, I struggle with it. My mind just won't shut off. But maybe I need to give it another try.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice. But even a few minutes here and there can be helpful. And the podcast also talked about the importance of setting boundaries between work and your personal life. It's so easy these days to be always on, always checking emails, but it's crucial to create space for yourself to just, recharge.
So putting down the phone,
hmm
stepping away from the computer, and actually doing things you enjoy outside of work. Sign me up.
Exactly. And don't forget about nurturing those relationships with friends and family. Those connections outside of work, they're so important for your overall well-being. And they can give you a much needed sense of perspective when work feels, a little overwhelming.
It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right? Making sure you're taking care of yourself so that you can show up as like the best, most energized version of yourself for your team.
Exactly. And the podcast made a great point. Self-care, it's not one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you and then actually making it a regular part of your routine.
It's about listening to your body, listening to your mind, and giving yourself permission to prioritize your well-being.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel guilty taking time for myself, like I should always be working or doing something productive.
I think we all feel that way sometimes. But the podcast encourages us to reframe self-care. Think of it as an investment, not an indulgence.
An investment in yourself, your ability to lead effectively, and even your team's success.
Exactly. When you take care of yourself, you're more equipped to handle challenges, make good decisions, inspire your team, and just create a more positive and productive work environment.
So it's really a win-win for everyone. And it really emphasizes that being a leader, it's not about sacrificing your well-being. It's about leading from a place of strength, resilience, and wholeness.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. We've explored so much about what it means to be a leader, the essential skills, the mindset shifts, the challenges, and the importance of continuous growth.
We talked about the power of informal leadership, all the different ways to lead depending on the situation, and how communication is like the foundation of building strong teams and creating a great work environment.
And we've learned that self-care, it's not just some fluffy extra. It's a crucial part of being an effective leader.
It's been such an insightful and inspiring look at this whole idea of leadership, which is, it's complex and always changing.
Before we wrap up, I want to thank you all, our amazing listeners, for joining us on this journey. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even a few practical tips that'll help you on your own path to becoming a leader. And remember, leadership, it's a journey. It's not about reaching some final destination. It's about constantly learning, growing, and connecting with others.
And it's about taking care of yourself along the way so you can lead with passion, purpose, and a whole lot of heart.
Until next time, keep diving deep.